What happened that day is we were arriving into a village to conduct a tribal leader engagement with the elders. As soon as we were rolling into the village with our patrol, we noticed that men, specifically military-aged men only, had lined up on the sides of the street facing our patrol looking inboard, very upset appearances on their face. So as soon as we saw this baseline change from what we had seen earlier in that morning in that same village, we knew something was about ready to happen. I announced that in our vehicle. Then we immediately were hit with a car bomb, a very large car bomb which was filled with fuel. That impacted against our second vehicle. It detonated about 5 feet from that vehicle 2 in our convoy. It knocked the Marine sergeant who was manning the turret gun in that vehicle down. He was actually on fire very briefly until he extinguished himself. Then we began to receive machine gun fire from the south side of the road. So that vehicle that was right there, that incident, the Marine in the troop compartment stood to his feet, aimed it in his light machine gun and engaged that vehicle. The turret gunner extinguished the flames off of himself, aimed in that same vehicle, and they killed the individuals that were firing at us from that vehicle. They were managing the perception in the international media that we killed civilians, which the highest toll had led up to that we killed 19 civilians, wounded 50 additional civilians, and among them were almost entirely small infants, little children, women, and elderly, which was completely false.
None of which you had actually witnessed at the scene itself?
No, the 30 Marines and corpsmen, as well as the Afghan interpreter that were on our patrol, all testified that they did not see any civilians killed. I even reinforced that with a polygraph taken by the president of the American Polygraph Association, which I submitted prior to the court of inquiry. The most relevant question was, did I see any Afghan civilians killed? And the answer was no, and there was no deception indicated. That polygraph was also verified by 2 states' bureaus of investigation, showing no deception indicated. The evidence that came in was hearsay, and it started from 2 sources. The first source was on the Afghan side. So the locals, the tribal elders in that area of Badikat, Afghanistan, protested to the Governor Sharzai for Nangarhar province. People were protesting in the streets, shouting "Death to America, death to Karzai." This is evidenced in the New York Times newspaper the following day on the 5th of March. So Karzai was getting a lot of sensationalized protest, people threatening to kill him. He felt he needed to do something. So the narrative coming from the Afghan side was that all these Marines had just opened fire and massacred innocent women and children and elderly inside the town. That was on the Afghan side. On the military side, what opened Pandora's box was we had a Marine liaison officer, someone that came from North Carolina and was assigned to the Special Operations Task Force where we were working for. And this gentleman, he had also distorted the reports and the information that was coming in. He had said that we were not reporting the information, which was factually incorrect as proven in the courtroom, where it stated that he heard our initial report coming over the radio and then he went to the break room. So there was this perception both with the Army Special Operations Command that did not receive us very well, did not set us up to succeed in theater, that we were cowboys. That was the narrative that went out in the international press, that MARSOC couldn't compete, they were cowboys, they're reckless, and they opened fire. So similar narratives, both from the Afghan side as well as the U.S. military, the day of the ambush went out in the international press, and basically from that point, we were fighting a losing battle. When you have the president of Afghanistan and then you have your own Marine Special Operations Liaison Officer pushing this narrative out that we did kill civilians, and that's being what's being picked up in the press, we also, those words from our Marine Special Operations liaison had influenced the Army Special Forces colonel that we worked for, his boss back in Tampa, the 2-star Army Special Forces general, as well as our 2-star general, who, as soon as we were kicked out of Afghanistan, myself and 7 others who we flew back to the United States, what was pushed out in the mainstream media by our commanding general, who, while there was a criminal investigation going on, he went up and testified to a Senate committee, and Congressman Adam Smith from Washington State said there's enough information in these reports to show that this is, at a minimum, excessive force. Following that, we had comments from the Commandant of the Marine Corps, as well as then the Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. Both were Marine 4-star generals, commenting that the Commandant of the Marine Corps was very disappointed in our performance. So that type of negative, command influence, how are we going to get a fair trial from any Marines when the Commandant of the Marine Corps, the Commanding General of the Marine Special Operations, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, our entire chain of command had made comments to the press that were well known, that we had done things that were disappointing, that were excessive force. And then we had an Army colonel that was the battle space commander in that area, made very unprecedented public comments to the Pentagon press corps. Many writers that were there, such as Reuters, captured his comments where he stated that this was a stain on our honor, that it was a terrible, terrible mistake, and he apologized. The 7 of us who were named in that investigation had very devastating effects on our lives. Our immediate families, those who were married, 3 out of the 4 of us, have since been divorced. Men who had, wives, children, their families shattered, finances destroyed. The emotional and professional consequence of, there is no recourse of being falsely alleged. There's no way to be compensated, or you just return to work. And when you return to work, the stigma was that we did get away with murder. That was going across throughout the command at the Marine Special Operations Command and throughout the entire Department of Defense. And I continually received comments from people saying, how many people did you guys actually kill? How many civilians did you kill? The completely false narrative still continued to exist within the military because of those terms, those weak words that were used and still are used to this day by the military. They acted appropriately. A similar case that had not even gone to a court, which had gone through a process called an Article 32 hearing. It's just a hearing that had been adjudicated the year before by the convening authority of that same command, Marine Central Command. The previous commander, Lieutenant General Mattis, had ended the case for 2 Marines, Captain Stone and Lance Corporal Sherratt, by stating that in his eyes and in the eyes of the law, those Marines are innocent. And that's what we have asked for, but because that type of a verdict has never happened, throughout the civilian world and the media, to this day, we have the perception that's printed in the media, as most recently as January 2015, that we killed civilians. That's going on continuously, and that's why it is important for us to get the word out to straighten the record.